Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 0 of What the Fundraising. Today is going to be a little bit different. Instead of me interviewing an amazing guest, I have John and Becky from We Are For Good here to interview me so that you can learn more about your host and why it is that I'm having this podcast all of a sudden. I'm going to give you an inside peek into my business, into my life, into my family, and inside some of the real and raw reasons why I'm having some of these hard conversations about the nonprofit sector and how we can revolutionize it and disrupt it for good. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you. And I know how important it is that our relationship starts off on the right foot. So I could not be more excited for you to get to know my good friends in this process as well. We Are For Good has a 3 times a week podcast. I have no idea how they do it. An incredible community, amazing consulting services. If you are not already following them, you should get on that right now, or maybe after you listen to this episode. But thank you for joining us today, for being a part of this journey, and for the good work that you're doing to make your organization and the nonprofit sector better every day. Let's dive in. I'm so excited and thrilled and honored to be here with Becky and John from We Are For Good to kick off What the Fundraising. This is episode 00. And I thought about how I wanted to really introduce this as an entity and kick off season 1 with some kind of intro. And someone was like, you need to find someone who's going to interview you. Like, let's find people who could interview you. And there was just only one group of people that I wanted to do that. And I wanted it to be you guys. And so I'm so grateful that you said, yes, I love what you do so much. And being on your show was just one of the most fun things I've ever done. So I'm thrilled that you agreed to help me start off this way. Thank you.
Let's be honest. If Mallory Erickson asked us to detail her car, we would drive across the country and do it. So anything that you need us to do, we are there. We love you and adore you.
You realize we define our life as before we met Mallory and after. Like, it was such a defining moment.
Yeah,
so
we need an acronym for that.
The honor is huge for us.
Okay, well, I'm going to hand it off to you guys. Thank you for saying that, but I'm going to hand it off to you guys. I'm going to let you run this thing.
Well, we are so excited. It's episode 0. This is the tone setting episode about what the fundraising? What is the tone? What are we trying to achieve? And it's really just a time to get to know our incredible friend, who is one of the most empathetic, kind, but bold disruptors in this sector. And so we want your audience to come to know, trust, and love you in the way that we do. And you have such an incredible point of view that we believe is just going to launch the nonprofit sector into a new way of thinking, into a new way of operating, and to a new way of connecting. And so I want to just say, the first time we met you, before I get into the first question, do you remember this, John?
I do.
Mallory came onto our podcast. She had met with our producer beforehand, and our producer was like, I have a mic drop guest for you. I met this woman. She is in California. We're in Oklahoma. We're probably the first people you've ever met from Oklahoma on this podcast. And she said she is going to knock your socks off. She came onto our podcast. She disrupted and changed everything about the way we thought about partnerships. And then we fell in love with your heart and your soul and the kind human you are. And yeah, you could never get rid of us. We're your BFFs for life.
I couldn't agree more. It's just, Mallory is the complete package of friend. And I'll say, when we get asked, who would you want to work with? And if we could go back into our former life, you're the type of coach, and I say coach specifically, that you need as a development professional. So I was so excited you were launching a podcast, because we all need that. We need the inner work to be able to go do the hard outer work of development. And so I'm so proud and happy for you and to be here.
Let's do this. Okay. So question number 1 is, we want you to share your falling into nonprofit story. I don't think we've had a guest on our podcast in 140 episodes who has said, I actively went into the nonprofit sector. So lead us through sort of organizations and positions and how you got into our sector.
Yeah. So I also didn't think I would spend my life in the nonprofit sector, but my leaving college in my undergrad from the University of Michigan, I was really interested in education policy. So I thought I wanted to work at the Department of Education. I was going to go to Washington, but I was probably going to do that via law school or a master's in public policy. But I wanted to spend a few years sort of like on the ground in the public education system before I, entered that next chapter of my life. So I found an organization called Citizen Schools that really fused together the nonprofit sort of on the ground inside the public schools. And they also had a policy arm of the organization. They also had the nonprofit arm, the advocacy arm of the organization. So I thought it was a great opportunity for me to really see the connection between those different places and spaces. I had worked when I had been at the University of Michigan, I had been a part of something called the Ginsberg Center, where I was taking a sociology class on education, policy, history while working in the Detroit public schools. And for me, it was just sort of the epitome of deep learning and just immersion into when you're trying to solve big problems. How do you both trigger your heart and your mind at the same time? And so I was inspired by the opportunity to do that at Citizen Schools. I actually didn't work in their HQ office, which had been the whole point of me sort of going to their Boston location, because what I really fell in love with was being inside the school with the kids, partnering with teachers. And so I stayed there for a number of years as a teaching fellow. I was an AmeriCorps member, got my master's in education. And then stayed on as a campus director with them. I then went and did some consulting work for an organization called Peace First in New York City that also had sort of an in-school partnership model focused on social emotional learning. And then after that, really started to get interested in the idea of cultural immersion and cultural exchange, both with young people from the US going abroad, but also with students in other countries coming to the US. So for 5 years of my life, I worked for and helped grow an organization called Global Student Embassy. And we worked with youth in the US, Nicaragua, and Ecuador. I grew that organization from about 300,000 to 2 million. And I think, before that point, I knew, this is where I'm going to be. Like, I love the nonprofit sector and I really believe in its power for transformative change. And I saw problems all over the place, right? Like I saw problems with fundraising and program development and scarcity mindset. But I just, in my core and in my gut, which is still where I sit, just believe that this sector has the potential to be such a powerful force. And so I spent a lot of years really banging my head against the wall, trying to prove that belief to be true. And the thing I talk about a lot is that throughout all of this, I had big fundraising expectations. I absolutely hated fundraising. I left Global Student Embassy, became the managing director of another organization, grew that organization from 1 million to 3.6 before I transitioned out. But again, and that it was really inside that organization that my framework around fundraising changed, because I went through an executive coach certification program. I studied design thinking with IDEO. I worked with BJ Fogg on behavior change and habit design, none of which were related to my fundraising. Yeah. But the frameworks kind of like came together for me at the same moment. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't have to be done the way we've been historically trained to do this. And why do I continue to study best practices from a system or a sector that hasn't actually figured out the best practice for this thing yet? And it really opened my eyes to the learning that's outside of the nonprofit sector that can fundamentally change the way that we do things inside for good. And that's really the foundation of this podcast and the foundation of all of my work, is just that we have been missing big lessons. We have been missing big opportunities because we are in our tunnel vision inside the sector. And I know I grew up here too, so I totally get it. That's how I operated for 13 years. But there is so much we can do to strengthen what we do individually and the sector as a whole when we pick our heads up out of that sand.
Well, goodness, there's so many things that we need to unpack.
Holy smokes.
But I mean, before we move too far off, I mean, you're such a social justice warrior. It comes through how you've poured yourself into your work. And I'm just blown away at your experience. Honestly, every time I hear pieces of your story, I'm just like, no wonder Mallory is the way that she is. This pedigree and this kind of time of just learning and growing has really served you in the space that you're in today. Would you take us back though? Like, what is Mallory like on the playground growing up? Who is this girl? Where did she come from? What is your family dynamic like? And just kind of fill in a little bit of the gaps, because we're going to come back to all the framework and good stuff, but I want to go there.
Yeah. So who is Mallory on the playground? Well, I'm on the playground again right now with my 2-year-old daughter, which is just so fun. So I'm the oldest of 4 women. I grew up in the East Bay in California. And I'm also the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And I say that because that's such a significant part of my upbringing. And, she really helped raise me with my mom. And my mom was first generation American. My family's from Hungary on that side. And so just really grew up with a lot of conversation around injustice and inequity and the importance of standing up for what's right and what happens when we don't. And so I think, I am not a religious person, but my Jewish culture is a huge founding principle of my work, really in terms of, one of the principles of Reform Judaism in particular is tikkun olam, this idea of repairing the world and just what our job is in doing that. And so from a young age, like I was really involved in my youth groups work and, just found the social sector to be just powerful and inclusive in a lot of ways that I didn't necessarily find in the environment that I grew up in. And, as the oldest of 4, also think there was a piece of my identity that was really linked to like being the helper. My parents tried a 3rd time for a boy and got twin girls, and John, I'm looking at you. And I remember like, oh my gosh, my dad, and now he's in heaven, of course, with 4 girls, but there were 4 kids. I was 6 when my youngest sisters were born. And so I really tried to like be a helper and, not get in the way of what my siblings needed in a lot of ways. And so it's been an interesting kind of identity shift, I think, as women in general, and then me and my own kind of family really fell into being that helper by necessity. And it's been an interesting journey for me to sort of step out and be like, okay, I want to be a person committed to service and community because that's a core value of mine, but not because that's the only thing that makes me worthy. Where I think that is, I really grew up with a real fear-based value around helping, that like, I better be helpful or else, I better be nice or else, I better be kind or else. Cause that was Mallory. She was the nice one. She was the helpful one. And so I derived a lot of my like, okay, this is who I have to be. And it really wasn't until my mid-20s that I was like, wait a second, I get to actually choose how I show up. And it doesn't mean these values are bad values. Of course they're not. But I really have switched the way that I approach them from a real conscious-based perspective. And that's a big part of my coaching work with clients as well.
Okay. Could Mallory Erickson be any more of a more loving, evolved, and self-aware human being? I mean, there's so much to tap into and to double click on there. And one, I just want to tell you that the way you show up in business, the way you show up in your friendships, and I will put a pin in the fact that you are clearly my most favorite friend that I have met in the last year since we have launched this company. But the way that you show up is so grounded in that value system that you're talking about. And I just think of the legacy that you honor through your grandmother's life and the way that you have this arc for justice. And I mean, I will even share a personal story that Mallory a couple months ago, and I don't even remember what the latest senseless shooting of an unarmed Black man was, but we were both so upset about it. And so anybody else would have just been upset and kind of sat in the angst of that, not Mallory. She gets on social, she makes a gift, toward a movement that would not only eradicate this, but provide justice. And then she calls on other people to rise up and match her. And that is the kind of evolved human that is not just preaching, she's doing. And so I really want to double click on this value system, because I think that you have some wonderful, deeply entrenched values that you've created for your company. And I would love for you to just talk about how you bake them into what you do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so, diversity, equity, and inclusion is obviously a strong value in my company and sort of my personal work. I would say, though, the other values, like when I think about, what are some of the values of my company, or what are some of the values that I hold really dear, I'm not sure that a lot of them are common. Like I was thinking about this before. I was like, I wonder how common these are in terms of company values. Like one of my top values is curiosity. I think that curiosity is the solution to so much. It's the solution to judgment. It's the solution to black and white thinking. It's solution to low energy, to negative self-talk. It's like, where can we get curious? Like we get so certain, right, that we have this perfect way, this right way, the only way. And the world is not black and white. And so curiosity is just like a very top value for me. The other is integrity. That's woven into like transparency and honesty, and just, something I think about all the time when people are deciding to work with me or to hire me is like, gosh, they don't know if they can trust me or not, and I feel that too, right? When I'm figuring out providers for something, and it's just so it saddens me that we even have to like question integrity now, but it's just such a core principle of mine. And another is courage. I put courage on there not because it's a natural value of mine, but because it's one I really intentionally work on to like be courageous. Like, gosh, I'm scared of that. I'm scared to do that. I'm scared to say that. I'm scared to put that out there. Like, okay, but you value courage. You value courage more than your fear. And so that's a really intentional one. I talk a lot about authenticity and imperfection. I talk a lot about it for fundraisers. I train on it. I teach on it. It's a huge part of my program because I believe so deeply it is the key to sustainable fundraising success. And so I hold myself to a really high standard there too, in terms of letting myself be imperfect and visible, and letting myself be authentic and visible, and taking whatever backlash, comes with that, which sometimes it does. But it's okay because I know that that's the road to success for me and my business, to fundraisers and their fundraising. And then the other two values are accountability. Like I just hold myself really accountable to the things I commit to, the people I commit to. Like, like when you're my person, like I'm all in. I'm all in. And that you're my client, you're my friend, you're my family member. Like you have me, and I have your back. And that's just that's sometimes a hard value to choose, because I have to also choose myself and make sure that I'm not, holding myself to a level of accountability that doesn't allow space for me. So that one always takes some work, but it is just something I really value. And then the last one I'll say, I'm probably saying way too many, but I do have a lot of values, is vulnerability. That I just feel like that's the point of all of this. Like, I just don't want to be some robot on this planet. And I just want to feel things deeply. And sometimes that is really hard to do. And I can't watch scary movies because I just feel the pain of all the people in the movies. And my husband is like, oh my God, like, please. But I feel everything because I just am like, my heart is open and my eyes are open. And it is a really hard place to live in that level of vulnerability. But I just don't want any other existence when it comes down to it. So that's another kind of core value of mine.
Well, I think I've heard you talk a lot about how you feel really does inform of a gut check almost. And to me, it has been disruptive how you teach people to listen to that. I wonder if you would share a little bit of that, because it's spoken to me when you've shared it on social, and I go back and I'm like, I need to keep reading this. Would you kind of share that little story?
Yes. So, I can share the story that I posted about recently. And then, so years ago, I became yoga teacher certified. And one of the things that was really interesting about that experience for me is that what I found, it was an immersive certification. So I spent 1 month at a farm in Guatemala. And, at the first few weeks, I just kept asking, am I doing this right? And I kept looking, I'd look under my arm or look between my legs, like, how's everyone else doing it? And does this look right? And does this is this the right thing? And I know I just kept asking that. And at some point, like 2 weeks in, maybe all of a sudden I just kind of shut up. And I was like, and I started asking myself, does this feel right? Like, does this feel right? Like, who cares? What does right even mean? My body's not her body. My body's not her body. It's never going to look that way when it's in that position. So why am I so obsessed with this right? And it totally changed my experience with yoga. And the other day I was in a yoga class and I had that hit come back to me that I just all of a sudden in the middle of the yoga class, I was covered in chills and I came out of my pose. I was tearing up and I wrote down on paper, everything changed when I stopped asking, is this right? And started asking, how does this feel? And when I think about that shift, it has been true for everything in my life. That's what changed my fundraising. When I stopped asking, is this the right way to fundraise? Is this the right type of email to send? You can find so many different examples of things out there. The right thing to send is what is authentically you? How does it feel to you? Even the way that I build templates inside Power Partners are very non-traditional in terms of the spaces that I have people plug themselves into. It's not just here's your organization's name, but it's here, we have to exist inside these things. And to be a good fundraiser, you don't need to fundraise exactly like me. You don't need to fundraise exactly like anyone. You need to fundraise like you. And I feel like the key to all of this is tapping into those questions. How does this feel? I've had partnership opportunities, sponsorship opportunities for my company that are exciting, right? Financially, maybe reputationally. And I always come back to but how does this feel? Our bodies know so much, our bodies and our bellies, we hold information there that is all in that space of curiosity. And I feel like we fall into these conditioned tendencies of not listening to it because we're I don't have time, or I'm just going to think about this critically and, put it on some chart, a pro-con list or whatever. But it's gosh, there's wisdom that doesn't live there that you have. And so that is just such a routine for me. And now at this point, pretty subconscious, I think, until I had that moment a few weeks ago of just constantly checking in with how does this feel? And being really honest with myself when something doesn't feel good, and sometimes making the really hard decision to not do something, even if all the data or all the things, sometimes my team members will be Mallory, come on, you're supposed to do blah, blah, blah. I'm it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And I know that if I act out of alignment with my feelings, you're not going to get the best me. You're not going to get my best energy. I'm going to dread doing the thing you're asking me to do. And my capacity is going to decrease as a result. So it's just such a driving question. And I think for fundraisers, a hugely missing one.
Mallory, where were you the last 20 years of my career? I needed someone to tell me that. Yeah, she has been kicking butt. And John,
I don't know what word you say on your podcast.
I love this metaphor so much for your life, for your career. And I honestly hadn't heard that story because to me, it is the secret sauce of fundraising in this new brave new world that we're in right now. And I have to compliment you about it too, because to me, it all comes back to those two core values of yours, which is authenticity and vulnerability. And you know that we are huge proponents of the art of fundraising. There are tried and true systems, that you can follow step by step in any academic fundraising book. However, if you get to know someone on a human level, you understand their heart, you understand their motivations, you understand nuance about your relationship, it is going to require you to do what I talk about with my daughters all the time, which is listen to the little man inside your stomach. Mm-hmm. Your gut has something to tell you. And when we listen to that, extraordinary things begin to happen. And that is how great movements begin to escalate and grow and ripple. And people want to be a part of that. Why? Because it feels good, because it feels natural. And it leads to things like being named Forbes's leading disruptor in the nonprofit sector. Can we talk about this for a second?
Like, Mallory, this is a huge
This
deal.
is so huge. So earlier this summer, Forbes came out with an article, and it was actually entitled like female leaders that are disrupting and changing these 5 sectors. In that little category of fundraising in the entire world, Forbes selected our friend, Mallory Erickson. And I want to give everybody this quote very quickly because I thought it was really powerful. She says, as an executive coach in the non-for-profit world, Mallory Erickson helps nonprofits understand how to avoid overbaked donor stewardship by more strategically nurturing donor partnership. Her technique helps reduce burnout among nonprofit employees and adds the human touch back into what should be a human-focused industry. I have to tell you, when I read that article and I stopped and paused to wipe away the tears, I printed that sucker off, drove across town and put it on my mom's fridge because that's how proud I was of you. Tell us about what this meant to you, because I know it was a huge shock, but I have to say, as your friend, as your colleague, as a champion of what you're putting into the world, those of us who read it were cheering Arsenio Hall style, pumping our fist, because we feel like the sector is finally identifying and seeing that we need to do a hard pivot into this organic human way of approaching fundraising. So talk about what this article meant.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for all of that. And, it's interesting. It's like, gosh, I'm going to try not to cry too much. I feel like a lot of times, or I don't know how many other people this happened to, but so much throughout my career, I heard things like, Mallory, but you're so capable. You could do anything. Don't you want to go work for Google or Facebook or Apple? I just people would say that all the time, like I was playing small somehow inside the nonprofit sector. And one of the things I'm so deeply committed to is rewriting those stigmas, right? About how powerful the people inside this sector are and how amazing they are and how no one has any freaking idea what it takes to run a nonprofit on the shoestring budget they are running it on. So first of all, that. And so it was interesting having this thing come out that all of a sudden got a lot of people's attention who probably had a lot of beliefs about my career, which I thought was really interesting. And I think for me, the way that I think about it is yeah, it's cool. And I'm glad that fundraising was on there, frankly. I'm glad that the nonprofit sector was on there. I mean, that was kind of the thing I was the most pumped about. I was like, our sector is being included finally in things like this. So that felt really good. And I think the other thing that made me excited about it is that I know that one of the things that holds people back from working with me or taking power partners is that it feels scary to fundamentally fundraise differently. I know that for a lot of people, my process around listening to themselves slowing down in order to go faster, really building these intentional, strategic partnerships that are going to lead to sustainable, reliable revenue without that hustle is actually really uncomfortable for fundraisers at first, because we have this value system inside the sector that the hustle is what makes us worthy of raising that money. Like if I didn't hustle for it, I've had clients say that to me, like they've gotten a big gift from way less work than they anticipated. And they're like, I feel guilty about it. And so I know that that's one of the scary things about fundraising in a different way, or even investing in learning a different way to fundraise is like, is it going to work for me? Okay, this is new, but does it really work? And so the Forbes thing for me was more like, I hope this gives people the confidence that they don't have to keep doing things the way they've been doing them, that there is another way that they can get off the hamster hustle wheel. And so more than anything, it's just, I hope it gives people hope that they aren't stuck in these old school fundraising methods that didn't work for me, that haven't worked for any of my clients, especially not, maybe they have temporarily worked in bringing money here or there, but they're not lasting and they're leading to burnout. They're making people leave their jobs, leave the sector, the whole like broken ecosystem around it too.
Well, I just want to say one more thing on this, because to me, this was such a moment in time. This was such a pivotal moment in our sector where I felt like, one, there were people finally kind of quirking their eyebrows saying, oh, do we need to disrupt the sector? There are people who want to do that. And then two, it gave them permission to lean into it and to explore that why that you're talking about. And I just sat there thinking, our friend is the poster child of this movement, no pressure. But it like brought me back like to this moment, like this quote where it's like, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'm sitting there thinking, John, we are all going to stand on Mallory's shoulders. She is paving this way. She is trailblazing this path that is going to connect humanity and empathy and the desires that we all have that I think, frankly, have been unearthed in COVID as we're trying to find purpose and meaning, because we understand life is fragile and precious. And this is the time of which we pivot. And I could not be more overjoyed, more just enthusiastic that you could be the shepherd, for us. And again, no pressure, but I am totally in your flock and we are behind you. And I think the most gratifying part is the more we talk about it, the more we are finding little soldiers who want to come along and want to do things differently. So bravo.
Yeah. And thank you. I can't really handle what you just said, but, but I think, it's so interesting because it's like, I don't feel like a giant. Like, I feel like we are all standing hand in hand on some shore, just taking one courageous step after the other. That's why I keep courage as like one of my core values, because so many of the things I've talked about or I've said felt so scary to say the first time I said them. The first time I ever said, I hate fundraising, I was so scared to admit that. Or the first time I ever said, I think my money beliefs are actually leading to the reason I'm not great at fundraising, like my own money beliefs. Like, I think the way I spend money has a lot to do with why I'm not fundraising well. Or the first time I said, God, that felt so uncomfortable. I felt like I wasn't totally honest in that meeting. I mean, I didn't lie, but I felt like I wasn't totally honest and it just felt bad. And, one of the things I say, I did not feel like I had any place to say those things before. And I think that's the thing I hear the most from people is just like, wow, like even, in the quiet DMs or the little emails of just like, God, I never thought we were allowed to say that. And so I just think like, for me, it's also a lesson in that like disruption doesn't have to be some big huge performance of something. It's just like, I'm just like sharing my truth that happens to be the truth, like so many other people's. And we've all just been really scared to talk about it. And I was really scared and am really scared sometimes too. But I just know so deeply that we just like have to keep doing it.
Well, the fact that you do all the things we've just described, and I'm glad that you're getting the attention and recognition for it, but we know you personally too, and there's just no ego involved. There's no ego in the way you present yourself, but also just personally. And I just think that that is your secret sauce that keeps this authenticity and this vulnerability, and why people love you and gravitate and want to learn from you, because you're honest that you're learning too. And it's about the community being lifted. So I have the chills. I'm trying to make my chills to lay down.
Hold it together.
Something else before we move from values that I think is just so true of you is that you have got such a heart to lift the voice of the oppressed, those that do not have a microphone. You provide that microphone to people in a lot of different ways. And so would you talk about that? I've seen you lift fellow women in this sector, the BIPOC community, all of the different, things that we've faced over the last couple of years since we've found you. But we'd love for you to speak into that as well of why that's important to you and how you've done that.
Yeah, I think it's just a constant recognition of my own privilege. I think it's been really easy given, I shared a little bit about my family's history. I think it was easy for me when I was younger to separate myself, maybe other myself from needing to take responsibility for the way that other groups of people have been marginalized and oppressed and discriminated against. And, just in my own learning and work, have really recognized that actually my responsibility is to step up in a much bigger way. I was not exposed to diverse voices as even consulting options when I was leading organizations. And, there are just so many things that I feel like are so wrong about the ecosystem that surrounds the nonprofit sector, and many things that are happening within the nonprofit sector, both for around fundraising and volunteerism and a number of different things. And I'm not going to solve them all, but I'm definitely going to give my audience and my platform or open it up for a higher level of inclusion that I typically see, and that I believe needs to be a part of everything that we do.
Thank you for showing up the way that you do. Thank you for you seemingly always, to John's point, put your ego aside and you lift the person next to you, grab the hand of the person that's beneath you, and you pull them up. And that's what we should do. That's what every human being on earth should strive to do. And I don't want to get off this topic about empowering women until I talk to you about what is it like being a wife and a mom and a small business owner. I want to know the joys, the realities, the struggles, and the kind of lessons that you're hoping to teach sweet little 2-year-old Emmy as you're modeling this very big life for her.
Well, one thing I'll just say maybe about that last point even is, she's turning 2 in a few weeks. And I really feel like my number one goal is to just not mess her up, to let her be, to let her be completely her and not make her adopt my stuff and not make her what I think anything is, but just to cultivate and let her be completely uniquely her and not add barriers and baggage. And that is really what it's very funny because nobody would have anticipated this, but I'm a very relaxed mom. And as someone who is not the most relaxed in other areas of my life, it's been pretty interesting to watch this, for myself too. And I feel like motherhood has taught me so much about business and life and other relationships too, of just surrender is one of my main mantras, just surrender. And I bring a lot of those same values, curiosity. I get curious. Okay, you're having a massive tantrum in the middle of the kitchen. We're trying to go to daycare. I definitely have a call in 15 minutes, but let me just like take a beat and try to get curious about like what is triggering this situation right now. And so really trying to like apply those values, and same with vulnerability. It's really interesting. My business and my daughter were born really close to each other. And so it's very interesting the way that those things have kind of grown together. Emmy, when she was first born, I have no idea why I did this, but she would start crying and she was like a few weeks old. And I would be like, tell me about it. Like, tell me about it, baby. Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And I just talk to her. I just give her space, to cry. And I didn't shove a pacifier in her mouth, and I didn't shush her. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but for some reason, that wasn't what I felt called to do. What I felt called to do was ask her about her pain. Like, does something hurt? Like, is something, I have no idea why. But it's interesting. What I found with her was that a lot of times me just asking questions like that calmed her right down. And so it's been really interesting to like, let her be vulnerable, let her be scared, not draw a lot of meaning from it. People are always joking about how many bumps and bruises the girl has, but it's like, I let her be brave and courageous and vulnerable. And because she'll find her own boundaries. She's so different than me. She's a really unique combination of me and Ryan. And Ryan is like an introvert, and Emmy is very introverted at first, like totally Ryan when you first meet her. And then the moment, like she's like me, the moment you're her person, she's like all in. And so it's really interesting it's been amazing to watch this. And Ryan just makes our world go round. I mean, there's no way I could have the business I have today without him really, I mean, I want to say sharing domestic responsibilities. And he's probably listening to this like, girl, I do 75% of everything around this house.
You're building that domestic partnership for you.
But, he has a big career and, he works at a big company. He's in a big role, and he is so my partner in everything. And I couldn't do any of it without him. And raising Emmy with him is just a ball. And I love being a working mom. I mean, it is hard. It is so hard, but I feel like the narrative around being a working mom is often like, I don't know, not negative, but it's just kind of always like, that's like the hardest combination in the world. And I want to say like single working moms, I bow down to you every day. But for me, being a working mom, I think provides me with a ton of balance. I have a hard day at work and I get to go home and be with my daughter. I have a hard Emmy morning and I get to go to work. And I love that balance. When it's a hard day at work and a hard Emmy day, yep, those days, super rough, but they aren't most of them. And I just learned so much in the different pieces of my life that I feel like nurture and support the others. And I think that comes from allowing myself to be like fully me in all of it.
Well, you have a beautiful family, and we'd love watching from afar, and hopefully we get to hang out with y'all in person too, because it's just a really special relationship that y'all have. So
Indeed.
Thank you for sharing about that. Okay, I love all things frameworks, and you have been kind of teasing this, but you just are such a strategic thinker, Mallory. And something that I remember striking me from the first time we met is just how, as a teacher, you don't want to just teach something one-off that worked for you, maybe at one of your offices over the years, but you've really zoomed out, blended psychology with it, sociology, all this like passion that you have into what really works in a framework that everybody can adopt. And that's Power Partners, is how can you build these amazing relationships that breed a ton of fundraising and better communications across the board. So would you kind of share a little bit about the founding of that and what it really means to the people that have been through your course?
Throughout 2020, my one-on-ones filled up really fast and I just couldn't meet the need that was coming in. And so I sort of took a step back and I said, okay, what am I doing with these one-on-ones? What are the questions I'm getting asked the most? And how can I build a course? You know, I'm a teacher by training. Like, how can I build a self-guided course that can really fuse like what I know from an education standpoint to what I know as an executive coach and all these sort of other frameworks I've been exposed to. And so I stopped my one-on-ones in October of 2020, and I basically spent 3 months building Power Partners. And this is what I'll say about the experience, which is so interesting. And then I'll share what some of the frameworks are. For months before this, I had this constant feeling. And even during parts of it, like, you know, when you can't remember a word and you're like, I know it's in there, and it kind of drives you crazy. I felt that way for months. I was like, there is something in there that like, it's there. And I just like can't reach it yet. And then when I finally started producing Power Partners, it was like it came out so fast. And it was just, I was like, that's it. That's the thing that I have been looking for. And what it was really around was like, okay, what are the things my brain has been trained to do by combining all these different frameworks? What does my brain now naturally do when it combines my habit design with design thinking, with executive coaching? And so it required me to basically kind of like reverse engineer without someone needing to get certified as an executive coach or going through all the programs that I had gone through to bring me to that moment. I kind of had to reverse engineer how somebody could think the way that I was thinking when I was applying those multiple frameworks at one time. I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense. Does it make sense?
Sense, and I feel like a bobblehead because my head is nodding so often.
I actually feel more impressed than I already was.
Right?
That's possible.
So one of the big, and let me take a step. One of the big underlying frameworks is called funder mapping, and inside that is this thing called asset mapping. And what this was created around was the constant question I got from people about what is our lowest hanging fruit. So if there was any question I got on a discovery call the most, by far it was that, Mallory, can you just tell us our lowest hanging fruit? I'm like, no, I can't tell you that in 5 minutes after looking at the homepage of your website and I don't even understand your mission statement. Like, there's no way. But I was like, but I need to figure out how to help you identify that. And so that's what funder mapping is all about. So I realized that part of what, when people were hiring me on retainer and hiring me one-on-one, part of what I was doing was this process of lenses. So through executive coaching, I really learned about this idea of lenses, which is that we all show up to every situation with the perceptions, beliefs, desires, goals that we hold, right? I'm wearing blue lenses. Becky's wearing green lenses. John, you're wearing red lenses. And unless I put on your glasses, I'm never going to be able to speak directly to what it is you're interested in, right? And so the thing I saw with nonprofits all the time is they were sending the same type of outreach email to a foundation as they were to a corporate partner, as they were to an individual. And I was like, oh man, they really do not understand how differently those entities are thinking from one another and from them. So I walk people through a process that's called funder lenses, and we go type of, like we do foundations, corporate partners. Inside corporate partners, I actually get way more granular because there's a big difference between marketing, corporate social responsibility, and a corporate foundation. So there's actually a different lens for each of those. And then we talk about individuals, which also there are a variety of lenses within individuals. But that's the first thing I have them do. I have them really deeply understand their current funders and funder prospects based on a number of different components. Then I have them do something called asset mapping. So I have them write out all of the things of value inside their organization. And I'm going to tell you that this is more magical than I even realized when I was first coming up with it. So the idea is that nonprofits are holding so many things of value that go way beyond the programs and services that they're offering. Their audience, their email list size, the thought leaders on their board of directors, the skills of their staff members, right? The product placement inside the gift baskets that they send out to their clients, whatever it is, right? There's so many assets dozens, if not hundreds, inside these different organizations. So I have them write all of that out. And then I have them organize those types of assets by the desires of the different types of funders. So we know, right, that like a foundation might not care about your list size, but a corporate partner will. A foundation is going to care about thought leaders on your board of directors. Actually, a corporate partner might care about that too, right? But have them organize them based on the funder lenses. So funder lenses are first. And then we see where's the most heat. So like if you look at your corporate assets and you have, 56 of them, and you look at your foundation assets and you have 13 of them, then my goal is for you to start your lowest hanging fruit is to build corporate sponsorship around either your current, like a full annual program or maybe a particular event, right? Because there's so much heat there. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have a foundation strategy. You're not going to have diversified funding, but you need to pick one bridge. I call it one bridge to start with, because the problem is that when we're trying to do everything at once, we are losing so many like brain calories to context switching. And we're building all these half-built bridges that are not getting our organization to where we're trying to go. So the funder mapping process helps you identify your lowest hanging fruit, and then you move into what's called effective engagement, which helps you apply everything you learned into your outreach, right? So you are writing totally different types of outreach emails than you ever wrote before, because you are talking to your funders through their lenses. You're talking about your assets and you're talking about win-win partnerships. And I cannot tell you the amount of funders. I kind of feel ridiculous saying this. I have had so many funders thank me for how I teach things, and not like just saying like, thanks for like including our needs in the way that you talk about. I mean, I've had it happen in funding conversations, but I even had a situation where I led a training on corporate sponsorship, and the sponsor of the whole training came on at the end. I had no idea he was even there. And he just said, I just want to thank you for how you're training fundraisers around this, because I know, it was wild. It was so wild. He was like, somebody can come to me with something I really believe in, but I have to pass this by 47 business partners. So if you cannot help me make the case around win-win partnership, I cannot bring this anywhere. And he's just like, I feel like I'm never getting emails like the one you described during this training. No one's ever talking to me that way. And I hear it from people inside Power Partners all the time that they're shocked with the response rate they get from people, how quickly they get in front of people, how quickly they get, funding. And then also my favorite stories are the ones where like I just had this call with someone and she was like, I asked the questions, you laid out, and I just watched the funder's shoulders relax. And I heard her say, wow, no one's asked me that. No one's ever asked me that before. And that's my favorite part.
Who's surprised that Mallory created the Power Partners that allows the funders to be seen and appreciated and valued? Like, it's not lost on me that of course that is the course. And it's scary that that's disruptive, right?
Yeah.
That people feel seen in this process is disruptive, but it is, especially those that have been in it.
We have the same brain, because I was literally thinking the way Mallory shows up in life is the way that she has built Power Partners to make things more efficient, to make them more human, and to make someone feel seen. And I want to give Power Partners just a little slight love right now, because I love this concept of no more half-built bridges. But I feel like Power Partners is such a smart, emboldening, sharpening framework. And just even as a marketer, I hear about something like what you're saying about, well, I think the market needs this. And you go to sleep after you put this post out. And I have to admit, if I'm being authentic, I sweat. I'm like sweating, thinking about putting something out there and waking up and having 180 people say, I'm ready to go on Monday. It's like, whoa. But as a marketer, I'm like, the market is so hungry for this. And you showed up and created this framework that felt good. And I just want to give you some props through the lens of someone who's watching this go down. So I'm a part of the Power Partners Facebook group. I'm watching it go on in Instagram. And I want to just say, one, this process works. And I don't even mean that as like an infomercial, kind of a sales. 1-800. Oh, John's lifelong goal is to like, QVC or something like that. But it's not like that. This is a process that works. And we see it all the time on Facebook. People are posting all the time.
Screenshots.
And that is important because the bean counters want to know that we're making progress and we're getting money in the door. But the best part to me is watching the human response to how Power Partners has made people feel courageous. It's made them feel authentic. You have created a space where people come in, and it's almost like when your kid comes in and they've successfully tied their own shoes or buckled themselves in the car seat. It's like, I did it. And the joy you have for them. And we're all celebrating in community, even if it's a very tiny nonprofit who never thought they could have had the courage to walk in and ask for a gift at that level. And the person that's funding it feels so great because it was a partnership. It wasn't an ask. So I could not love it more, and I could not endorse it more. I want to get in there, and I want you to lead me through Power Partners for where breaking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wait, actually, can I say something about that too, or two really quick things?
Podcast.
I think this piece is really critical. So inside Power Partners, right before they do effective engagement, like where they're sending out the emails, that's where the executive coaching comes in. So right before they're going to click send on these emails, there's a module about here's what you're going to hear in your head right before you click send. They might be mad at me for asking for more. My friends might hate me because I send this out every year at the end of the year. They might not give at all if I send this email. All those little gremlin voices, the self-critic, the chatter that are baked into fundraising so deeply. However you get support around your fundraising, it has to include that. I honestly don't want to see one more fundraising program, course, training, anything that does not acknowledge the inner blocks that hold us back from being able to execute the strategy in front of us. Strategy is important. The science of fundraising, totally there are best practices there, but they will not be effective if they are siloed from what is happening inside your brain and inside your body when you try to implement them. I'll get off my soapbox.
Oh, don't, because I'm going back to my major gift officer days, and that imposter narrative that you have created in your own head is such a psychological roadblock. And I think the word that I keep thinking of is your word in this situation, which you are giving people permission to surrender. And it's like, give it up, like embrace this courage, let it go, send that button, make that ask, like let it go. And the success that's coming out of it is such a great boon, I think, to the sector. It's growing the nonprofit, it's growing the professional, it's giving such a incredible nucleus to the relationship between the funder and the nonprofit. It is like win, 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 win. I could not geek out more on Power Partners. So bravo to you. Thanks for listening to the little man inside your stomach. Okay, we're going to go, as we're starting to like kind of wind down this conversation, I want to get into some of these soft questions. And I just want to know, who inspires you?
Gosh, everyone. I mean, I think for me, I am not inspired by the big things. I'm inspired by the little things. Like I'm inspired by the people who post inside Power Partners of moving someone from a $1,500 sponsorship to a $10,000 sponsorship, because I know how scary that was to ask. I'm just inspired by people who take that one next courageous step at a time. I think that's what keeps me going and what keeps me inspired every day.
And the thing that I love about who you are as an individual, about the way that you've set up your business, is you're such a good listener. And I think this podcast is just going to put a flag in the ground for the sector that is going to buoy so many conversations that have been waiting to be told, stories that are going to be shared. And so our last big question for you is, what are your dreams for your company? What is your dream for the podcast?
My dream for the podcast is that it's a safe landing for people to feel seen and heard, and that it provides like what you're saying, kind of a diversity of experiences and insights that we are complex people. And, I think at the root of what I'm talking about in terms of fundraising, it's just that like fundraising is a human act, and humans are diverse and complex and multifaceted. And when we try to nurture the fundraiser in us just with one mode of education, we're missing all the other limbs that are involved. And so this podcast is diverse from episode to episode. There are podcasts where I'm hysterically laughing half the time, and others where I cry 3 times, and others where I just have to stop and like write notes down because what they're bringing up is just like this breakthrough concept. And, people have told me I have to systematize and make sure it's predictable. And I'm like, you know what? What's predictable is that you're going to get some mind-blowing value, and that I want everyone to find a space and a place here that hits their humanness, where they're ready to let me in. And then in terms, I've never said that before. People have been asking me how to kind of sum this all up, but I think when that is what I want, that's really what I want. And for my business, Power Partners is the foundation. People keep asking me, what's next, but that will always be the core of what I do, because I think it's it. I didn't create it to make money. I didn't create it to like have a product get out there and then do another product. Like, this is what I believe can fundamentally change the sector. And so my goal is that every development person, every executive director can take Power Partners at some point in their career. Like, that's my like true deep goal. I'm starting to think about what are like kind of add-ons or things that people need as new concepts come into my learning. And so those I'm, starting to figure out what those structures are going to be. I'll show you my very sneak preview of the outline of one of the courses, one of the like intro course type things that, again, it is Power Partners, but I've been thinking a lot about the conditions of success. Like, what are the principles of organizational success that allow you to not only to really flourish using the Power Partners method? And like, I'll give you some teaser examples. Like, one of them is like a condition of success is like conscious choice, that like your organization operates from a place of conscious choice for all of your employees, right? That's a foundational principle. Another is that there's organizational safety, that you can talk about fears, that you can talk about discomfort, that the leaders are providing that, right? Another is mutual benefit, right? Win-win. Like, are you willing to talk about mutual benefit as a nonprofit? Because that holds so many organizations back when they're just like, well, they should just give to us because we're a nonprofit, right? That is not a condition for success based on the Power Partner framework. So this is going to come soon, the sort of conditions of success course and some other little things here and there. But really what I want is to get as many people access to Power Partners as possible.
She's like the Dalai Lama of the nonprofit.
She's the Dolly Parton.
Or the Dolly Parton.
I'd be so happy to be the either.
Okay, we have had the best time going through understanding your heart, understanding your why. I didn't think it was possible, but I adore you even more. But for those of your listeners that are still hanging around, we wanted to do some quick hit questions as we're like rounding out this conversation, because we're going to humanize our friend and we're going to let you know and kind of peek behind the curtain about the things that are important to her, as simple as maybe, what is your favorite road trip snack? These are power questions, Mallory.
Oh my gosh. I feel okay. Snyder's honey mustard, like broken pretzel things. That is my number one road trip snack.
John has one that's very similar to that. Okay, John.
Really?
Okay. Movie you've seen more than any other.
Ooh. Movie I have seen more than any other. Oh, 10 Things I Hate About You. I just will never match my 8th grade obsession with Heath Ledger. Just nothing can ever compare to that. And I don't even want to think about how many times I watched that movie.
Yes. It's the modernized version of Taming of the Shrew, Shakespeare. And it is so fantastic. And the music is great. So yeah. I feel you on that one. Okay. Favorite memory with Emmy or trip that you've taken with her, even if it's out into the woods, because I know you guys.
Oh my gosh. Oh God, it is so hard to pick. That feels so hard to pick. We just recently went and visited a friend, and they had a bouncy house in their basement, and she did it. Yeah, it's amazing. They're in New Hampshire, and just watching her bounce around with the older kids was so cute. But then she got a little freaked out at the very end, and so for the rest of the trip, anything we would say, Emmy, do you want a blank? She would say, no bouncy house. And we're still hearing about it. We're still hearing no bouncy house. And I just am so obsessed with her. It's hard to pick a favorite memory, but that one, I just love it.
Bouncy houses can be traumatizing. Who would have thought? See, this is what you don't know when you're messing up your kids.
Bouncy houses in basements. It sounds a little creepy.
First concert you ever attended?
The Rolling Stones.
Oh my gosh. You're supposed to have a really embarrassing one like I do. Millie Vanilli.
Oh my God, that's good. That is really good. I was taken by an adult. I was taken by my youth group director when I was in 7th grade. So that's probably the only reason it's not embarrassing.
Okay, what's your Enneagram type?
Gosh, I don't know. I need to stop taking the free ones because they all tell me something different. Yeah.
2-wing 2 or 2-wing 3. She's either a helper or an achiever. I can't figure it out.
So that is true. So I get 2 and 3 a lot, but once in a while I get 1, which is really interesting. And I actually think because there's a lot of perfectionist tendencies in 1, and I call myself a recovering perfectionist. So I think it's interesting when we think about what are our conditioned tendencies versus who we are after we've done a lot of work on ourselves. And so I feel like I still am in there a little bit in 1, but I'm like always really actively working on it.
Okay, what's your favorite human quality?
Can I say vulnerability again?
Can.
I think that's it. I think that's what makes us human, actually.
I just love you so much. Okay, thank you for saying that one.
Well, this would be the last one. How would you like to be remembered?
Oh God, I don't care. I mean, I think when I think about it, I just don't care. I hope I'm not even there in a story. I hope it just changes. I hope we just all get to feel better about the work that we're doing and the money that we're moving and the impact that we're making. And I hope we just actually solve these freaking problems. And I spend literally zero energy thinking about my legacy. I hope I am irrelevant. I hope I'm irrelevant. And I say that to people who think about joining my program or who want to work with someone wanted to work with me recently. And I was like one-on-one and I was like, yeah, I have a 3-month program. They were like, well, what if I want you like forever? And I was like, well, we can talk about that. But honestly, what I want is for you to not need me anymore. And I hope that, that's what all of this becomes. Like you said, like some of the things I'm teaching, God, it's sad I have to be teaching them. And I just hope it doesn't matter anymore. And that it just is the way we get to be.
Okay. That was like the most beautiful, selfless bow that could have been tied on this conversation. And one, you're failing at this goal because you are so relevant and so important and so needed right now. But I agree with you because here's the thing, people. We work in nonprofits. We love social justice. And yet we want to eradicate these problems. We want to be put out of business so that we can go on and go do something else that serves people. And if you can put the ego in the drawer and push it away, that is going to escalate our potential to have impact so much more. And I love you for saying that. I have loved this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mallory Erickson, kindness creator, justice seeker, dreamer, goodness celebrator, emboldener of the little guy. Thank you for seeing everybody. Thank you for creating this podcast. We are beyond humbled and honored that we got to have this conversation with you. Go do good.
Thank you both so much. I am so grateful that you would do this with me, especially under very short notice when you have a billion other things to do. So no, you know how much I love We Are for Good and both of you and Julie, and I'm so grateful for all the goodness that you're putting out there and for giving folks like me different platforms to get up on our soapboxes when we need to. So I really, thank you.
It's our pleasure. Let's go change the world.
Honor.
You guys, I have to be honest that I am overwhelmed with how much we just covered, with how deep we went, and for the amazing compliments about my work. I am really here to learn right alongside you, to grow and change and question and get curious. I hope this episode gave you a sense of what I'm all about, what you're going to get from tuning into conversations between me and these amazing experts that I feel so lucky to interview. And that this is really a community for you to chime in. I want to know what you think. I want to know who you want to hear from. I want to know what you want to talk about. I am in this with you. And I know that the only way we're going to revolutionize this sector is for us to do it together. And that is what I am here for, to stand side by side with you, to have your back so that we can change this sector for good. So thank you for joining me for episode 0 of What the Fundraising. To get all of the notes from today, you can go to my website, malloryerickson.com/podcast, and make sure that you're subscribing and rating this podcast on your favorite platform. Whew. All right, you guys, are you ready to dive into season 1? Let's go.